Yes. All right. Right on. Right on. Hey, if you are in kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, and sixth, I'm just catching the cue here, you are dismissed. K through 6, you are dismissed. Your leaders will be in the back, take you to your groups. So it's good to be back with you today. That was we kind of made a last-minute adjustment we were planning on taking some time away and weren't necessarily planning on Sunday, but decided to go ahead and include Sunday on that. So I'm appreciative of Frederick Clement to come and fill in my place. And here's what I heard. I heard that you were very engaging. That's what I heard. Just throwing that out there. Just heard you were very engaging. Very engaging. He said I was preaching. They were very engaging. It's like, really? That's interesting. That's interesting. So, but I know him and his family felt very welcomed by you, and so thank you so much for just being. I'm not surprised. I'm just been in this with you for 12 years, and thankful for you. We're coming to the end of the book of Mark, and we have been going through Mark for quite some time, and where we're at today is a very familiar part of the story of Christ, and it's the crucifixion. And here's the thing, because it is so familiar, I'm afraid that what will happen, and just what tends to happen when we're familiar with something, is that it loses its beauty and its the significance behind it. When we become used to something, it just becomes familiar, kind of old hat. It just becomes something that we can just kind of hear, and just kind of goes in one ear out the other. Because hey, I don't really need to listen to that because I already know that. I already know what that's all about. So we kind of lose its beauty, use the significance of the thing that we once cherished so much. For example, 4 years ago, our family began looking for a house to buy, and we were I was especially looking for somewhere that had maybe a little bit of land, maybe 3 or 4 acres, that we could kind of spread out a bit. Kids were getting older, and so we went looking at some houses. Didn't really find the house that was really everything that we wanted. And then we went to this one house, and the realtor, what many of you know, Wendy Muncie, she came and she said, I got a house for just to look at. I got it there, and it didn't have the land that I was really looking for, but we went in, and it was a nice house, and it was, we liked the house, the whole deal. We're like, okay, yeah. And so Wendy then tells my wife, because her and my wife know each other very well, and said, hey, let's go to the backyard. I've got the deal closer. And we went to the backyard, and there was this outbuilding out there. It's like this brick. It's got a fireplace. It's got windows all around it. And I knew. I didn't have a chance. Like that, okay, yeah. And we bought the house. And so we moved in. We're like, okay, this building right here is not going to be like the shed. All right, this is going to be like nice. We're going to keep this we're going to keep stuff out of it like the previous owners. Like we went in it, there was like a mower in there, some yard stuff in there. We're like, we're not going to do that. Or this is not going to be the storage shed. This is going to be nice. We're going to keep it clean, keep it up. And so we moved everything in. We just did everything we could to just keep that open, keep it free from just stuff, just clutter and stuff. And so, in fact, not long after we moved in, I think it was like in January, in the middle of January, we went out there, had a fire in the fireplace. We had dinner out there, and I think I got a picture right there. Yeah, had dinner out there, and it was a good time. Like, this is what we're going to do. This is what this is for. And so we've been there 4 years, and here's what it looks like right now. I just took a picture the other day. You can't really see it very well, but there's a mower in there. There's some yard stuff. There's the bikes are stuffed in there, and so this is what we got. But this is what happens. This is what happens. You become like something that was so like you get used to something, and it loses its luster. It loses its beauty. It becomes just normal. It just becomes normal. The next 2 weeks, we're talking about the crucifixion and the death of Jesus, the cross of Jesus Christ. And I fear that we can become so familiar with hearing the cross of Jesus that we lose the power and the beauty in it. And yet Paul says in Galatians in chapter 6, he says, far be it from me that I would boast in anything else outside of the cross of Christ. Like, let there not be anything else that takes the place of the cross of Christ. Like, let it be utmost in my thoughts and in our conversations. Let it be the cross of Christ, that it never loses its beauty and its power in our mind and in our lives. And so let me pray for us as we get into Mark 15. Father, thank you so much for this word. Thankful for the gospel. Thankful that we have this, what we are learning about today, what we are revisiting today, what many of us have known and heard and cherished for many, many years. God, thank you that this is not just a story. This is not just words that were written down, that this is reality. This is truth, that you really did send Jesus and he really did go to the cross on behalf of sinners. And so, Father, I pray that we maybe once again we would find the beauty, we would see the glory that is the cross. And Father, I pray that you would open our eyes that we might behold wonderful things. We prayed in Jesus' name. Amen. So we're in Mark 15. We're going to catch up in verse 21 here in just a moment. Let me just get us there. Jesus had just been arrested, so it's Friday. Jesus had just been arrested on Thursday, and the night before he was brought to the palace of the high priest, where he was placed in front of the Sanhedrin. It's just a council of Jewish leaders, 70 Jewish leaders, the top-ranking Jewish leaders. He's brought before them. They had prepared for this moment. They had brought in witnesses to testify against Jesus. The problem that they had was they couldn't get any of these guys' testimonies to line up. They couldn't agree with one another. It had to be incredibly frustrating for all the Jewish leaders because, as Mark tells us, he wants them destroyed, or they want Jesus destroyed. They want Jesus to, not just his body, and they certainly want that. That's what they're after. That's what they got their sights set on Jesus being executed, but they wanted anything about Jesus to be erased. They wanted to remove his reputation. They wanted to remove any of his influence altogether. And why was that? Because Jesus did not fit in with their idea of the Messiah. They had an understanding of the Messiah. Jesus did not fit it. They were looking for someone to come in and free them from Rome, to lead a charge against Rome, to free them so they could pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what they wanted. This was supreme to them. That if they couldn't have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then what's life worth living? So they thought, well, heaven is going to God. His agenda is our agenda. And he's going to send us a Messiah, and he's going to let us to live with life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness on this earth. And so Jesus comes, and that's not his pursuit. That's not his end. And Jesus was not fitting into their understanding of happiness and freedom. So Jesus has got to go. You do not fit in with what we want. You've got to go. The problem is they didn't have the authority to do away with Jesus. They didn't have the authority to put him to death, particularly the week of Passover, which it was. And so they take Jesus to Pilate, and they know that Pilate is the Roman governor. He has been sent by Rome to govern the people there in Judea, to make sure that they don't cause any ruckus. They don't come up against Rome. And so Pilate is there, and so they know that Pilate could care less if this guy claims to be Messiah. He doesn't care. And so they change the script, and they say, this guy, Jesus, he claims to be king. So all of a sudden, it's not about blasphemy against God. It's about treason against Rome. It's treason against Caesar. So Pilate says, okay, well, I'll take him. And he took him, and he questioned him. And for the life of him, he could not find a reason to put this guy to death. And so he's going, okay, these guys, these Jewish leaders, they must be jealous of this guy for some reason. And so he goes to the crowd that is standing out there, and he says, okay, here's what we're going to do. And Pilate's looking for a way out. In fact, you read another account of this same story, that Pilate's wife comes in and says, I had a dream about this guy. You don't want anything to do with him. Like, I think he is like some kind of holy man. Like, you don't want anything to do with him. So Pilate's trying to weasel his way out of this, get out of being responsible for this guy's imprisonment or his death. And so he goes and he says, all right, I got an idea. And so he puts Jesus before the people along with another guy that he has had in prison that was going to be crucified likely that day. And he says, all right, here's what we've got. I've got Barabbas and I've got Jesus. Barabbas, is a bad dude. I'll release one of these guys to you, thinking that the crowd, the Jewish leaders, yeah, they got a problem. They got issue with Jesus. They're jealous. But the crowd, certainly they'll be sympathetic. They know what's going on here. And so he said, well, in the meantime, the Jewish leaders had gone to all of the crowd and said, hey, when they ask us to which one they want released, tell them Barabbas. Tell them Barabbas. And so they were convinced, and so he said, which one do you want me to release? And the crowd says, give us Barabbas. We want Barabbas. And he's like, what? What do you want me to do with Jesus, who's like your king, the king of the Jews? And he said, and the crowd said, crucify him. And so they sent him to his execution by crucifixion. So Pilate, to save his own job, turns Jesus over to be crucified, and that's where we pick it up in verse 21. And it says, and they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. So it was customary to have the criminal carry his own cross. It would have been the cross beam to the place where he would be crucified. This was customary. The criminal carries his own cross beam to the place that he was crucified. But for some reason here it says, Mark tells us that they got somebody else. They got this Simon of Cyrene. Now, Cyrene is an area in northern Africa. So this guy was in Jerusalem, and it says he's just a passerby. He's just kind of minding his own business, and they tell him, you're going to carry the cross of Jesus. What's going on here? If it's customary for the criminal to carry his own cross, why is somebody else carrying the cross for Jesus? Well, right before this moment, Pilate, again, wanting to please the crowd, wanting to satisfy the crowd, ordered Jesus to be scourged. Roman scourging was an awful and savage punishment. The ancient historian Josephus wrote that the prisoner was stripped and bound to a post and beaten with a leather whip woven with bits of metal or bone. No maximum number of strokes was prescribed. The scourging lacerated and stripped the flesh, often exposing bone and intestines. One of its purposes was to shorten the duration of life during the crucifixion, because to be put to death by crucifixion, it took a long time. And so to kind of speed that up, they would put some of these prisoners or these criminals through a scourging. But scourging was so brutal that some prisoners died before ever reaching the cross. So this is what Jesus just endured before this moment. So apparently, due to weakness and loss of blood, Jesus was not able to carry his own crossbeam. So there's a man named Simon, again, just minding his own business, and the soldiers get him to carry the cross of Christ. If you've been with us as we've been studying Mark, you know Mark isn't one for details. It's the shortest gospel. It's the earliest gospel. It's the first gospel written. But he doesn't give us a lot of details. In fact, as we've gone through Mark, we've gone to like Luke, we've gone to John, we've gone to Matthew for some details to be like kind of fill in what's going on, because Mark just doesn't give us a lot of details. He says, here's what it is, and he just goes. In fact, I think one of his favorite words that he has used is the word immediately. This happened, and immediately this happens. And so he doesn't give us a lot of details. But it's interesting here that Mark does include some details. So when Mark does include details, we should pay attention, because it's just not normal Mark's style. And we see that's happening right here, that he gives us some details, that they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. Now, it's surprising enough that Mark would include Simon's name. It's very surprising that he would mention Simon's two sons and mention their names. Why is he including this detail? Why slow down the story right here to include the detail about this guy Simon from Cyrene, which nobody knows, and his two sons? Every scholar that I've read has said that Mark is obviously trying to communicate something here. He is doing something here. It's likely that the reason that he named that Simon's two sons is because these two, Rufus and Alexander, were members of the church in Rome. It would have been known by the original readers of this gospel. Mark was writing to, if you remember, he's writing this gospel for the intent of those in the believers in Rome to read. And so he's going, so here's what's happening. He's writing this, and he's going, and you know his two boys, Rufus and Alexander. Like they're believers. They're in Rome with you. In fact, they might go to your church. Here's what I love about this. Oftentimes, skeptics will come to the Bible and say, we can't trust the Bible because all of the things that happened in the Bible were written about way late, like way later. And so by the time they wrote it down, it was exaggerated. There was just some things that were just not true, and they just made up whatever they wanted to make up to fill in the details. But when you read Mark, and when you read, like, for instance, when you read Mark, Mark was written in 65, 70 AD, somewhere in there, which means he wrote his account of the gospel, the life of Jesus, about 30 or 40 years after all of these events took place. And here Mark's going, in the middle of all of this, in the middle of what they've done, they put Jesus on trial. They couldn't find anything against him, but still, to satisfy the crowd, Pilate turns him over. And in the middle of all of this going down, there's this guy named Simon who's caught in the crowd, and he's told to carry a cross of Jesus. And he's going, wait a second, you know Simon. You know Simon. It's Alexander and Rufus' father. Go talk to them about it. Go to them. Talk to them about it. Ask them about how this whole thing went down. That's what we have here in Mark. It's not like Mark's in a cave somewhere writing some story that he's making up, and then years later they uncover this story. No, he writes down what happened, and he sends it out and says, there are people who are still living who were there. Go ask them about it. Go ask them about what's going on or what happened. Something else that I think is interesting here, and listen, I don't know if this is the intention or not, or if there's something to this or not, but if you remember, when Jesus was arrested, what happened to his disciples? When Jesus was in the garden and he's praying, here comes Judas and all the soldiers, the whole crowd, and all these religious leaders. What happens to his disciples in that moment? They ran. The one, if you remember, Simon Peter, who said, when Jesus said, hey, when this all goes down for me, you're all going to leave. You're going to abandon me. And Simon Peter says, not this guy. They might, not me. And yet, Jesus has just been sentenced to death. He's beaten to the point of near death, and his friends, including Simon Peter, abandon him. And now, here's some random Simon helping Jesus with his cross. That should have been Simon Peter. That should have been Simon Peter. But when it got hard, Simon Peter denied Jesus and left. And now, here's another Simon fulfilling what Simon Peter was supposed to do. I read that and I go, I don't want that to be my life. I don't want that to be my life. I don't want God to have to find somebody else to do the thing that he has called me to do. And in your life, don't make God have to find someone else to do the thing that he has called you to do. Here's the thing, what God calls you to do, namely, point the world to Jesus, point the people in your life to Jesus, it is going to take faith. It is going to take faith. It is going to be terrifying at times. It is going to cost you. You're not going to feel ready. You're not going to feel equipped, so it's going to take faith. And God is going to get done what he has set out to do. So don't bail out when you're at the end of you and you need to step in to faith. Don't miss out on what God wants to do through you. Listen, he's going to use someone. He's going to get done what he has set out to do. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. So don't bail out when God is with what God has given you to do. He's going to use, so someone is going to get rewarded for that thing. Someone is going to get the joy from that. Don't miss it. Because you bailed when it got tough. You ran away when the next step that you were going to have to take was a step of faith. Because it's in the step of faith that God shows up. It's in the step of faith where God's strength is made known in your life. You don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss out. Well, the cross of Jesus is now on the back of this Simon of Cyrene. It says, and they brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Several years ago, I stood there at Golgotha, and if you would see it, you would know why it's called the place of the skull. I think we've got, you can see right here, you can see why they call it the place of the skull. And so they lead them. They bring Jesus to this place called Golgotha, And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. Wine, this concoction of wine and myrrh, was often given to prisoners to deaden the pain of crucifixion. But Jesus refuses it. If you remember in the garden, Jesus prayed, "Father, take this cup from me." You remember that? Like, this is what he's praying. He prays this like 3 times. God, would you just take this cup from me? And when we went through that, we explained that what the cup is. When he's talking about the cup, he's talking about the cup of God's wrath that will be poured out on sinners. That's what he's talking about. And so Jesus is knowing what is coming. He says, "Father, just take this cup from me." Could there be another way where I don't have to experience your wrath for their sin? Could there be another way? And if you remember, he's at the end of that time with the Father, he's resolved then to take it. I will take it. I will take the cup. And so this is what's happening here. With the scourging and the beatings and the mocking and in the crucifixion, this is what's happening. He's taking God's wrath for our sin in our place. And so when offered a way to deaden the pain, he's going, no, I've got a cup to drink. I have a cup to drink, and I will drink all of it. Jesus refuses to take the drug that makes life less painful, what makes doing the will of God less painful. It's the opposite of what we do, isn't it? And what we want to do is we want to get through this life as just as unscathed as possible. This is what we do with following Jesus as well. I want to follow Jesus. I want to go to heaven. But is there a way I can do this with as least amount of pain as possible? And so what do we do when things get hard, when things get tough? We run to things to deaden the pain. We run to things to help us not remember the pain, to keep us distracted from the pain. For some, it's drugs. And for some, it's alcohol. For some, it's in a relationship, just moving from one relationship to another, one boyfriend, girlfriend to another. For some, it's sex. For some, it's shopping. For some, it's living through the experiences of your kids. There are a lot of ways that we try to numb the pain of life. We're not content with the way life is going, so we run to things to deaden the pain. Jesus refuses to turn to anything but what God has called him to. For Jesus, it's what the psalmist said in Psalm 73, "My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." I wonder what it is that you run to. I wonder when life gets hard for you, when life gets lonely for you, when life gets painful for you, what is it that you run to distract you from the pain, to deaden the pain? It goes on, and it says, "And they crucified him and divided his garments among them, casting lots for them to decide what each should take." Now, we like to sanitize the crucifixion to make it palatable and appropriate for movies and telling the story to our children, but from what we just read, they took the clothes of Jesus, that he was likely naked on the cross to be shamed in public. You see, the point of crucifixion was not only punishment for the criminal, but it was used as an example to all non-Romans that this is what happens to anyone who comes against Rome. And so, since that is one of the primary purposes of the cross, they would do this in a very public place, out in the place where people are going about doing life. And so there's Jesus on the cross, likely naked, beaten so badly that it was prophesied of him that he would not even look human. He took his clothes and divided them among each other, which fulfilled what was written about him 500 years prior to this moment in Psalm chapter 22. And then it says, "And it was the third hour," which means 9 o'clock in the morning. It was the third hour when they crucified him. And the inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified two robbers, one on his right and one on his left. There are several clues in this chapter that show us that Mark is wanting to show that this trial and crucifixion of Jesus are meant to be understood as a royal enthronement of Jesus as the Messiah. Now, of course, those that were participating in this and those that were watching this, it was nothing but mockery. But the irony is that they were doing the very thing that they mocked him for. For instance, there are many references to Jesus in this chapter, many references to Jesus being the King of the Jews. Now, again, they didn't believe it, but they were using this phrase, the King of the Jews. Hail the King of the Jews. From Pilate to the soldiers to the sign that was placed over his head on the cross. After Jesus was scourged, they stripped him of his clothes and they put on him a crown of thorns and clothed him in a purple robe. And then in mockery, of course, they knelt before him and saluted him as king. And then he was crucified between two robbers. The language that Mark uses here to describe those who were crucified with Jesus, one on his right and one on his left, is almost identical to the language that Mark uses earlier in chapter 10 when James and John come to Jesus asking for a favor. Do you remember this? James and John, two of Jesus' disciples. In fact, another gospel writer tells us that their mom was included in all of this, and they come to Jesus and say, "Hey, we got a favor we'd like to ask you." You remember what they asked? In chapter 10, it says, "And they said to him, 'Would you grant us to sit one at your right and one at your left in your glory?'" And listen to Jesus' response. So they ask, we just want to sit one on your right, one on your left in your glory. And Jesus' response is, "You don't know what you're asking. Are you able," check this, "to drink the cup that I drink? Or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" You see, this is not the Messiah that anybody expected. Messiahs don't suffer. Messiahs certainly don't die. And to this day, the life of following this Messiah, this is not the life that we want. We're like James and John. Our expectation of glory is not the way of the cross. In fact, this is what everybody was thinking. It goes on in verse 29, it says, "And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, 'Aha, you who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days.'" Now, just a quick side note there. It was not Jesus who said that he would build or that he would destroy the temple. He said, "You all are going to destroy the temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days." That's what he said. Because what he's saying, you remember when he goes into the temple and he clears it out. Remember what he was doing there? We talked about this. That what he was doing is saying, this is irrelevant. That what's getting ready to happen, that I am the way. These sacrifices that you're doing, it's no longer relevant. I am the once and for all sacrifice. I am the temple. I'm declaring the temple irrelevant, useless. And so he says, "And you're going to destroy the temple, and I will raise it up in 3 days. You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." So also the chief priests with the scribes mocked him to one another, saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself." He cannot save himself. He cannot save himself. Why were they so sure that Jesus could not save himself? I'll tell you why. Because they simply couldn't imagine anyone not saving themselves if they had the ability to save themselves. If you've got the ability to save yourself, you certainly would do it. Anybody would. Obviously, you don't have the ability, therefore, you're still on the cross. They have no concept for what it means to give your life. To them, it's only about saving your life. Why? Because this life is where it's at. So I've got to do everything I can to make the most of this life. So loving others by putting their needs above my own, and putting their wants and their desires above my own, that makes no sense whatsoever. But Jesus would tell us, he would say that this kind of love, putting others before you, this kind of love, this kind of self-giving love, this is the kind of love that when the world sees it, they will know that you belong to me. In fact, John said in his letter, 1 John, he says, and this is the way that you'll know that you belong to me. You want to know if you're saved? You want to know if you belong to him? Do you love like this? That's what John says. That kind of love makes no sense. Because when God saves a person, he puts his Spirit inside of that person, giving that person the desire to love this way. He puts in that person the ability to love this way. This is why in a time when selfishness and division and rivalry and hatred have consumed us in our culture, this is the time where those who have been saved, those who have been made new with new hearts and new desires and a new way to love, that those people would stand out from the rest like light shining in the darkness. That these days, these times have been a proving ground of the reality of the presence of the gospel in the church. That has the gospel penetrated the lives of these people or not? Or do they actually have new hearts, new desires, new loves, or not? I know what they say. I know what they proclaim. I know what they preach. I know what they talk about. But I believe that this has been proving ground to say, is it real or is it not? Is there anything there? Are they any different? Tragically, what seems to be happening, darkness is collapsing in on the church. Where we are more passionate about politics and about the fight for our platforms and opinions than we are that people would see the love and the mercy of Jesus in the way that we love them and love one another and put their needs and desires before our own. He saved others, he cannot save himself. Because if anyone had the power to save his own life, well, he would, because that's what we do. It's me before you. It's my family before you. That's what we do. So apparently he doesn't have the ability to do that. The truth is, by not saving himself, he would save millions. He says, let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down from the cross that we may see and believe. All those who are walking by, they see this man on the cross with King of the Jews above his head, and they're going, you're no king, man. You are no king. If you were a king, you wouldn't be up there. Get yourself off the cross, and then we'll believe it. It's like Jesus being tempted in the wilderness all over again. Remember what happened in the wilderness? Satan comes to Jesus and said, turn these stones into bread. Throw yourself from this temple. All those people, you got them. They'll follow you in a heartbeat. You just do this miraculous, awesome deed, you got them. They'll follow you. That's what these people were saying. Prove yourself by something awesome, and we're in. Let's just be real. This is what we want Christianity to be. We want people to be drawn to Jesus by how awesome he makes our lives. I mean, look at this. I've got money in the bank. I've got health. I've got a great marriage. I mean, who wouldn't want this? But Jesus is going, look, I could call 10,000 angels to come get me off this cross, but I'm not going to do it. Why? Because in the end, what you need is God, not simply the stuff that he can give you. And if your longing for God is because of the gifts that you want him to give you, then what you want is not God. You just want his stuff. Ultimately, your love isn't for God. You're in love with stuff that you think that you need for your satisfaction and fulfillment. And Jesus rejects that. He says, I'm not giving you what you think you need, because what you need is the giver, not the gifts. It's in the giver where life is found, where your joy and your satisfaction is found. When the giver is your desire, when he is your delight, you will find that it doesn't matter what you have. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are in your life. There is a joy, there is a peace, there is a fulfillment that is unmoving, because there is a God who is behind it, who sees it all, who is working it all out for his glory and for your good. And he hasn't moved, and he hasn't changed. And he is committed to your good. Why? because he is committed to his glory. And if you've been coming here for any amount of time, you've heard it said, and this is what God is doing. He is out for his glory, and your good is not in competition with his glory. They're one and the same. Your good is all wrapped up in you making much of him. So Jesus is not fooled by taking the easy way out. In fact, he rejects the easy way because it's not about what he feels in the moment. Well, before we wrap this up, I want to go back to this Simon guy. The guy that was pulled out to carry the cross of Christ. Again, Mark, who doesn't give us a lot of details, for some reason, he slows down here. He tells us about his family, tells us his name, he tells us why he was there. And there's got to be something going on here. There must be something to this. And here's what I think it is. I think Mark wants to give his readers a picture of what it means to follow Jesus. You want to know what it looks like to follow Jesus? It looks like carrying a cross. That's what it looks like. Just a few chapters earlier, when Jesus was getting his popularity was growing and growing and growing. He had just fed thousands with a little boy's lunch, and people couldn't get enough of him. The crowd was just growing by the day, and they're all clamoring for his attention, and they can't get enough of his teaching and his miracles. And somewhere in the midst of that, Jesus stops and he says this. Calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, if anyone would come after me, like I know you're all clamoring for me, you want to come after me. Just for a moment, let's just get real. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and let's go. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake in the Gospels will save it. You see, here's what you get with Christianity. You get it right up front. Following Jesus is not the easy way. You get that right up front. There's no fine print in Christianity. It's right up front. You count the cost. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be like carrying your own cross to your death. It looks like denying yourself and losing your life. That's it. There's no bait and switch here. Jesus makes it very clear right up front. This is the life of a Christian. But see, here's the thing. I didn't preach very well. And so what do? We got to dumb that down. We got to spin that. We twist it. And so you get full-on prosperity gospel, or you get a soft prosperity gospel that says, no, you come to Jesus and he'll give you the good life. Man, no suffering. He'll just make it right. And yet Jesus says the call to follow me is a call to die. Now that is hard to hear. But it's right there. No fine print. So what's the option? The option is Satan comes to you and says, no, man, take the good life. Take the good life. Take the pleasure. Do whatever you want with money. Do whatever you want with sex. Whatever feels good in the moment for your life. Man, just do that. Fill your time, fill your life with those things. But in the fine print, it says, take pleasure for this little bit in this life and suffer forever in hell. And Christianity says, suffer now. Deny yourself now. And there's a banquet that is waiting for you. There's a life of joy and pleasure forevermore. Because it's not about these next 40, 50, 60, 70 years, however many years we might have. It's about the next million years. It's about the next 60, 70 billion years. This is what we have. And here's the thing. In these years that we have right now of denying ourselves and suffering He is with us the whole way. He's comforting us. He's encouraging us. He's hearing our prayers. He's working in them. He's filling us with joy and peace. And he's empowering us on this road of taking up our cross and following Jesus. Let's pray.